All right, trap number 7, dependency. So what do I mean when I say dependent? Well, that means to depend on someone. The ideal is to be interdependent. And what is interdependency? Well, think in terms of things on a global scale, how things work economically, how one country depends on another, how to some extent the US depends on China and the US also depends on Russia, and one country after another, how the US depends on Mexico, Mexico depends on the US. There's all these factors in terms of global economics, but we're not trying to speak about that. We're just talking about relationship dynamics. And in terms of a relationship, the ideal is to be interdependent. So interdependent means that you can depend on your partner, but you also depend on yourself. And you can depend on yourself effectively to the extent where you can handle your own shit and your whole world doesn't collapse if the person you're with decides to step out. Of course, that often does happen, doesn't always happen, but in situations where you have a man with a woman in a household, and especially if kids are involved, if the relationship just falls apart, if it just gets bad quickly, neither side, especially most often, I would say, the woman is not ready for that. Because the way everything tends to be designed in the household is you have a breadwinner. It can happen with women. Women could be the breadwinner, but more often it tends to be the men. But we're not just talking about finances here. We're also talking about emotional dependency. And emotional dependency can come just with the familiarity of always having someone around to talk to, of always having someone around to watch Netflix with, of always having someone around to be able to do something with, of always having someone around to allow you to feel like you're not lonely, to prevent you from feeling lonely. See, the ideal place to come into a relationship is the place where each person is whole inside and they can complement the other, but they don't need the other and the other doesn't need them. No, instead they appreciate the other. It's far more valuable to appreciate a person instead of need a person. Because when you need a person, you give off this needy energy. Okay, that's besides the point though, because here's the thing. If you're with someone, if you're in a serious relationship with them, then they're already used to your energy to some extent. So it's not like it's a disqualifier. It's not the same as if you're a man who goes to a bar and you try to hook up with a woman and then you're giving all this needy energy off because you just so desperately want to be able to take her home for the night. We're not talking about that. We're talking about just in terms of bringing a certain amount of displeasure into the equation because you need another person. Because when it comes to couples in a relationship, as much as a woman does want to be needed and a guy wants to be needed, when the other person gives off a needy energy, at one point or another, the man or the woman gets tired of that shit. They don't always want to feel like the person is so much in need of them that they can't even step out for a little while without them just losing their minds. And of course, a woman doesn't want to feel like a man's being possessive. And when a man gives off a certain neediness, sometimes that can manifest itself in terms of becoming possessive. Because you seem like a man that can't find something to do with himself, that can't find an extra creative endeavor to focus on, some extracurricular activity, that can't necessarily focus on his body and get his health in order, or focus on some business endeavor that you've been wanting to do, but you never actually engaged in. The woman and the man want to think that they want the other to need them, but they don't really want that. What they really want is to feel appreciated. They just want to feel appreciated. But here's the thing. That shouldn't even be something that you need there. You shouldn't need to feel like you're appreciated. If you are appreciated, great, that's a plus, but you shouldn't need it. In a relationship, you shouldn't need anything from the other. Okay, yes, you should be able to benefit from the other. You should be able to get help from the other. You should be able to have the other person's back. But as an individual, whether the woman or the man, you shouldn't put yourself in a position where you need them. Now, it's okay if you get into a relationship where, yes, you do depend on one person to get the kids to school, one person to put the kids to bed, and you may depend on one person to go out and make most of the money. But you as an individual should always be situated internally in such a space where you can, on a dime, step up and do what you need to do for yourself if things fall apart. This is something that no one tends to take seriously. They don't take it seriously because people don't tend to take internal work seriously. And if you watch this channel, you know it's all about the internal work. The peace, because when you put internal work in, When you put internal work in, you create real peace. You create authentic peace. You create genuine peace, and no one has genuine peace, but they like to think they have genuine peace. Go ask anybody if they're at peace. Now, some might be honest and say, not really at peace. There's a chance of that, but a lot of people would claim they're at peace, or they'll claim they're happy, thinking that happiness is peace. But even happiness isn't peace, and happiness isn't even happiness, because ultimately that's just a brief high in terms of anyone who experienced what they think is happiness. What a person actually wants in terms of happiness, when they think of happiness as a future experience, they're talking about being in a place of satisfaction. Okay, being in this place, or being in a state of satisfaction. When they think to the past, when they're happy, well, in their mind, it feels like satisfaction. It doesn't just feel like a high. So, in terms of dependency, what do? You go inside, you do deep internal work, because you get yourself to a place of peace where you don't need anything from the other person. If you don't need anything from the other person, you're more in a position to love selflessly, you're more in a position to give selflessly. You're more in a position to appreciate selflessly, and you want to be selfless, but you can't fake selflessness. You can't fake it. It's not something that can be faked. It's not something that can be faked. I promise you, it's not something that can be faked. You could try, people can smell it on you. Look. So that's what you want. For one side to be selfless, the other side needs to be selfless. But that only starts with work on yourself as an individual. So ideally, you want to do this before you get into a serious relationship where you're in a household with the person you love and you have kids. Often, way more than often, that's just not going to happen, which, okay, that's fine. But commit to deep internal work and then watch how your role changes. But you do not commit unless you're going to commit for a lifetime. And I've gone into this in the previous video. When I say commit for a lifetime, the reason you commit for a lifetime, the reason you make that commitment to yourself, because if you are able to get yourself to a genuine mind space where you actually made that commitment for life, to your consciousness work, to enhancing your consciousness, to deep internal work, then that means your mind is of a place. That means your mind is at a level of strength where it's ready to do what's necessary to close and heal and reach deep internal permanent peace, which almost nobody gets. I don't care what anybody says. That's real. On to the next one. Trap number 8. Let's get right into it. And this is a key trap, and this has been touched on in some of the other traps, I'm certain. And that's the ability to be alone. If you get in a relationship, one of the things you need to make sure that you're able to do, and that the person you're with is cool with, is you being alone. Because it's in this alone time where you're going to be able to have the time to work on yourself and to advance your consciousness. Consciousness is not something to be dismissive of. Just because it's not talked about in the mainstream, or you read a few books, or you heard a few clips online, and you have not raised your consciousness, does not mean that it's unimportant. It means you just don't know shit about it. Why don't you learn? Most of the most valuable shit there is to learn in the world is not shit that you're going to find online. Don't get me wrong. I learned a lot about consciousness online. But you know where I learned the most about consciousness? I learned the most about consciousness by going deep inside and spending thousands and thousands and thousands of hours doing consciousness work. I didn't fuck around about it. And that's how you want to be when it comes to yourself. Because guess what? In this world, there is no one more important than you. Period. Your kids, if you have kids, of course they're more important than you. I would jump in front of a train for my kids. But in terms of how you prioritize your time, you do need to prioritize peace above everything else, above even dealing with your kids as far as the first thing you do in a day. Because if you don't bring a peaceful person into the relationship you have with your kids, into how you engage with your kids, then the relationship with the kids is ultimately, inevitably going to end up strained to some extent. And once again, that is an inevitability. Period. Alone time is something you can get in a relationship just by having a room you can go to where you know no one's going to go into that room. Just by having a lock on your door. Just by making it clear to the woman you're with or the man you're with or your kids, hey, this is my time and I need to do this for me. You take that seriously and you do it every day. Here's the thing. When you're in a relationship, you get so used to the routines. You get so used to being around your kids. You get so used to being around your husband or being around your woman. And you get so used to also the work routine outside of that. You just deal with this constant, endless process of noise and stuff going on and one thing after another. You got to handle this. You got to do this. You hear this going on over here with your kids and the dishes and maybe doing something in the sink they shouldn't do, or maybe your kids are fighting, or maybe you hear your wife on the phone in the next room, or maybe you hear one of your kids turn the TV on in another room. Someone's knocking on the door. It might be a neighborhood kid that wants to play with one of your kids because they happen to be friends. And one thing after another, maybe your wife or your husband has family coming over. When do you get time alone? The trap you fall into is not getting time alone. You just get stuck in the routine. And then you have one day after another, and 1 week after another, and 1 month after another, and 1 year after another where you're not getting this time alone to work on yourself. You don't take it seriously until it's too late. You don't take it seriously until you feel depressed. Even though you're just in your mid-40s, because the relationship wore you down and you didn't even realize it was wearing you down. Because here's the thing. Your spirit speaks to you. Did you know your spirit speaks to you? Your spirit is always speaking to you. And if you fuck your spirit will fuck you too. That's the thing, because your spirit knows all, and your spirit knows what you want, so you can deny it to yourself, but you know you feel pulled to do certain things and do things in a certain way. And if there is confusion, if there is internal distortion, which there tends to be with so many people, because you get the clarity in terms of not dealing with internal distortion by going inside and doing energy block and getting a clearer connection with your intuition. You go inside, and then you'll solve the issue of distortion. You'll better be able to understand what your spirit is telling you. But you have to take the time to do this. You don't fuck around with this. You take it dead seriously. The alone time. You get the alone time in a room that's maybe just a meditation room, or you get it in your own room when everybody's out for the day or everybody's doing activities quietly in another area of your apartment or of your house, wherever you happen to live. Or maybe you have to go out and maybe you have some office space in the building that you do work at during the day, and then you get your time there. I don't know. Or maybe you actually go into your car and you do meditation in your car away from everybody. It is so critically important. It's really worth whatever inconvenience you have to deal with in order to be able to put time in. So if you have to take 15, 20 minutes out at what seems to be an inconvenient time when your family's already home and everybody's just going about their activities or trying to talk to you, if you have to just say, hey, yo, I need a minute. And you go out to your car for 15, 20 minutes to put time into meditation, it's worth it. It's worth it. Yes, it's long term, but the payoff, the motherfucking payoff. Or maybe I'm just lying. Maybe I'm just saying all this shit and, I haven't meditated a day in my life. And I don't know anything, I'm just saying I'm doing this for money. I'm just doing it for money. I don't really care about any of this stuff. You know what I mean? Nah, all this stuff, meditation, it's not real. It doesn't affect you at all. It's not real at all. What you need to do is you need to focus on money. You need to focus on getting more women. If you're a woman, you need to focus on getting more men. You need to focus on nicer cars and nicer houses and making the best impressions online and looking as cool as you can fucking look, but I'm fucking kidding. No, meditation is the shit. Consciousness work is the shit. It's everything. It's always been everything. That's where you want to go. That's the direction. Go deep inside. No one's going to tell you this. Nobody's going to validate this. At least almost nobody's going to validate this. And you don't go into meditation intending to half-ass or to try it out. Commit. And there's countless techniques, not just basic meditation, but you have to be willing to put the work in to get the fruits. And if you really are closed down and this really seems like something that in a million years will not be worth it to you, I don't do this. I'm not about this. But hey, maybe you should try a hallucinogenic. Maybe you should try ayahuasca. Okay? Maybe you need to try a psychedelic. Because while I do condone use of that type of drug, if you want to call it a drug, I condone it when it comes to being able to get a person who's so closed down to open up to see what's possible beyond the mundane reality that they deal with day in and day out. So, with that said, time alone, losing time alone, not having time alone, that is trap 8. So with that said, I'll be back with trap number 9. Dom out.